In a significant development for education in Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu has signed the student loan reenactment bill into law at the State House in Abuja. The new legislation, witnessed by key figures from the National Assembly, ministers and education stakeholders, repeals the previous Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act of 2023. Instead, it reenacts the Student Loans Access to Higher Education Bill 2024. The executive bill establishes the Nigerian Education Loan Fund as a corporate body tasked with receiving, managing, and investing funds to provide loans to Nigerians pursuing higher education, vocational training, and skills acquisition programs. This move is aimed at enhancing access to education and empowering individuals to pursue their academic and career aspirations. To have this conversation with us is Hassan Taiwo Soweto. He's an education rights activist. Good morning, Hassan. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me again today.
You're welcome. Okay, so we've had this conversation all the way from the time the whole idea was conceived in the first place of having a student loan bill. To when we had the president say he's going to go ahead with it, whether the CSOs and relevant stakeholders like it or not. The bill is going to come to life by January 2024. January came, it didn't happen. There was a back and forth, but finally, last week, it was signed into law. So the body has been formed. While some stakeholders were saying they are waiting for the president to appoint some, members, top members of the body who would handle this new enactment. I told Josh, I said, I cannot wait to hear what Soweto has to say about this. Soweto is here with us today. How do you react to this?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to start from a note of appreciation to the media, particularly iBrandTV. For the platform you provide consistently since last year, for the debate and discussions around this very important development in the education sector. Because I think without that kind of platform, the alternative voices and critical voices would not really have been able to come out as it has. Because what we are discussing now is not simply something that came as an act of magnanimity, by the government. I mean, this new reenactment. It was a product of a consistent campaign of bodies like the ERC, ASU, and Co. Because when you look at the new act, you could see that many of the critical points that stakeholders had been making, about the unworkability of some of the provisions of the previous act, were taken care of in this new act. But then, if you ask me, does it mean that this student loan policy itself is acceptable as a policy? I still maintain the position I've maintained right from the beginning, that student loan policy is not the solution to the problem of access in the education sector, and that if it's implemented, it's only going to lead to the opposite of what it intends to achieve, which is that more people are going to find themselves outside of the university system, and those who are able to obtain the loan are going to find themselves in lifelong indebtedness. And when you look at the resources of this country and the wealth that we have to ask ourselves whether this is actually the future we want for our children, the future of indebtedness, when there are resources actually that can make public education available for everyone, without the burden of a high fees and the burden of indebtedness. Because the reality is that we're not just discussing this policy from the point of view of the details alone. There's also the ideological underpinning of everything. Don't forget that this country constantly subsidizes all kinds of things. Pilgrimages are subsidized today. Without, some people go on Hajj and Co without paying a penny. So that when people like us are talking about free education, and some say it's not possible, some say that do you want people to go to school without paying a penny? Then we have to ask ourselves, it's a question of what we think is important, because actually some people are actually benefiting certain things from government that are not so relevant to the socioeconomic health of society, and they're benefiting them free of charge. So why is education not something that can be seen to be worthwhile for that kind of provisions? Because I think it all boils down to that. But again, like I said, this new Act obviously has had some improvement, and it confirms what we said at the previous Act, was a product of poor legislative draftsmanship. Because if you look at the State House press release, there was a clear public admission that the whole bill, the whole law was very bad. All of the point that we made about the family income threshold, about the guarantor requirements, about every other thing, the State House press release clearly said that these were the problems they think that the old law had. So we in the educational campaign take that as victory, for our campaign, for our consistent work. But then, the final victory really is to ensure that education does not become a debt burden on young people.
All right, that established, you did mention that the old bill had a lot of issues that you've consistently mentioned, by the way, and it's victorious for you that it was repealed and reenacted. Yeah. Good. So with all the adjustments that have been made, with the new bill that has just been signed into law, does that take away a good percentage of the challenges that you had with the entire idea in the first place? Do not forget that no matter how you look at it, the student loan bill worldwide, with different places, I'm talking developed climes, where it is currently in practice, people are left in indebtedness. I was telling Josh about a friend of mine who got married to her husband just immediately after college. It's been 8 years and they are still paying their student loan till today in the US. So it is a standard practice across board, and that's how it turns out for everybody. We do agree that there's been a lot of improvement, but the major issues are still there. Does it take it away for you? Does it make it easier to manage for you?
It doesn't. I mean, like I said, the fundamental point still remains, because what the government actually did was to cherry pick our proposals, to pick the ones that does not qualify the policy itself, which is guarantors requirements, the question of family income threshold, question of the governance system. But with regards to proposals that completely nullifies the policies that says that there is another way, they completely ignored those proposals. Because if you remember, we did the research and said that actually government could raise 1.7 trillion naira on an annual basis as additional resources to fund public education, something which will mean that they don't need to increase fees, they also don't need to implement a student loan, and education will be well funded. They ignored all of that. So, and that's because, as far as this government is concerned, it's an ideological point of view that education can no more be made available to those who cannot afford it. That's only to be available to those who actually can afford the fee, and if they cannot afford it, they must be prepared, to take a loan. So this improvement doesn't, remove those fundamental points. But we also live at a period where there is mass illusion, unfortunately, by a section of society, and the leadership of NANS has not made the situation even easy for everyone. Unfortunately, for instance, when the whole terrible bill was passed into law, the NANS leadership was there at Astro Rock, singing solidarity songs to the president. They never raised a single idea of difference. They never even noted all of the point that people like us eventually began to canvass around. And with this new law now, they have again gone into town. In fact, it should surprise you to learn that possibly sometimes this week, NANS will be organizing a so-called victory walk in Abuja to celebrate the enactment of the student loan. You have to ask yourself, this is completely ridiculous. Because by the time the loan scheme gets implemented, the repercussion will be cataclysmic for Nigeria. You just mentioned the example of your friend in the United States. That person has been paying for 8 years, but they have not even seen anything yet. They are going to pay it for the next 40 years. The average number of years to pay a student loan in the United States is 40 years. In fact, it is the biggest factor behind why many people don't go to college in the US because nobody wants to live under that level of indebtedness. People are not able to get married, and when they get married, they cannot start a family. And that is a society where people can even still say there are some jobs to be done. Here in Nigeria, there are no jobs of any kind. And to tell you that the government is not even thinking of jobs for anyone, they are saying that, you know, in the new act, those who don't get a job in the next 2 years should go and get, what do they call it, an affidavit, and submit it. So you're going to ask yourself, so this government actually is saying that it's normal. It's trying to normalize the idea of people leaving school 2 years after NYSC, and they don't have a job. And that's a big departure from what used to be the case in this country, where education was actually linked to national development, job creation, and all of that. But you have in society today a government that does not want to operate in that direction. It's a government that operates on the basis of privatization and all of that. So we are going to face this crisis going forward. What we intend to do as Education Right Campaign is to stay on this policy. We are fundamentally opposed to it. But it's possible that the government may be able to start implementing it now with these new provisions. We are also going to ensure that we don't leave Nigerian students. We are going to continue to explain to them what is coming, the crisis, and now they have to prepare to begin to fight. But a fight back is inevitable. One, with the student loan now, it's not going to be adequate, even for everyone. We are just talking about 200 billion naira. And they are talking about the student loan now, not just for student alone, it's also for vocational studies and skills acquisitions. And it's also going to be for upkeep. So what that means, therefore, is that unlike before, when it was just going to be for tuition, you know, now you are going to have a situation where maybe each beneficiary may be taking maybe as much as 1 million to 1.5 million, if not more. And there's also the plan to actually make it available to private institutions. And you know what that means, because given the level of fees in private institutions, which is far higher, you know, it means that you are going to have a race out of the public institutions. The public institutions are going to lose, you know, students in the coming period, because it will not make any sense, for instance, if I'm going to take a loan to actually get education, to then go to a university where, you know, because of strikes and other things, I may not graduate in the next 7 years. If I'm going to take a loan, why not just go to a private institution? So from that point of view, it's the death of public institutions is what we are going to see possibly in the next 5 or 10 years.